So today we come to Revelation chapter 20. We're nearly at the end of the story, and we come to a chapter that I think has been misunderstood pretty dramatically for so long. Now this may be a bit contentious, so I'm just going to get off the fence and tell you what I think. I guess my question to you is, after you've listened to what I say, what do you think? What do you make of this whole concept surrounding the millennium? Because that's what we come across in today's chapter. Now, if you've been listening to these daily podcasts, I think you'll get the gist of where I'm coming from. What I'm reading in the book of Revelation is John circulating round key themes, kind of going over the same story from different vantage points, different angles, bringing out his take, if you like, on history. Why is he doing that? Well, he's not trying to set up some sort of code for end times timetables. What he's trying to do is encourage the people of his time, and every time since then, to not compromise with the world that they live in, but to stand true to the promises they have in Jesus Christ. Now, one of the other things that you notice in the book of Revelation, and it is revelation, should I say, not revelations, is that you've got these sevens absolutely everywhere, patterns of seven. That's pretty deliberate. John's using that figure of seven to kind of make a key point. And the key point is that actually God is working towards an end to history, that seventh day, that day when everything is put right, where Jesus reigns forever, evil is dealt with, sin is done away with, and we can live with God as he'd always intended and always hoped for, forever. But if that's to take place, then the enemy of God, the one who's ruined his creation, has to be dealt with, and dealt with finally. So sevens really matter. And the key, I think, to understanding the millennium is to understand the structure where this particular thing comes. So if you bear with me as I go through my notes. As we come to chapter 19, verse 11, what I see here is a series of 7 visions. We've had this same picture of 7. We've seen it in the scrolls, we've seen it in the trumpets, we've seen it in the bowls. And what John does is he kind of says to us, what you see from an earthly perspective may not be the same picture as God sees from his heavenly perspective. So I'm going to whiz through this quite quickly, but I hope you'll get the gist of it. So chapter 19, verses 11 to 16 is the first of these 7 visions, and it covers Christ riding out to rule the nations. Now that's not future. That's what happened when Jesus won the crucial victory at the cross and at his resurrection. Jesus is now riding out as ruler, but not in the way that we might think. The second vision starts in verse 17 and is in 18 as well. Chapter 19, 17 and 18. It's a call to gather for the harvest of destruction. Now, you and I are part of this, because Jesus' reign has begun on earth as it is in heaven, but it's a reign not of power and authority and might, it's a reign of the gospel. It's Jesus saying that you can join his kingdom when you choose to put your faith and trust in Christ. See, as the gospel is preached, that's our battle. We wage war with truth, with the gospel. And as we believe, we change sides from those who are facing destruction to being part of Jesus' army. The third vision comes in verse 19 of chapter 19. It's a victory in battle. You see, ultimately, Jesus wins. We win if we're on his side. Now, as we come to chapter 20, we get the fourth vision. And this is where we come across Satan being bound for 1,000 years. So when was he bound? Well, if you look at the gospel and look at several other places in the New Testament, you find that Jesus talks about binding the strong man so that people may be released. So when was Satan bound? He was bound when Jesus defeated him at the cross. Now, Satan's still active, but now he's fighting a rearguard action. It's like D-Day. From D-Day, World War II was more or less won, but it had a lot more fighting to take place. So when Jesus won the victory, it was at the cross. And now the battle rages between those who preach the gospel and the powers of this world who seek to shut us up and to make us to continue to compromise in the ways of the enemy. The fifth vision comes in chapter 20, verses 4 to 10. It's the reign of the saints for 1,000 years. Now here's the thing. In a book that we take these symbols and ask what they mean, why do so many people take this 1,000-year reign as being literal? It doesn't make sense. To my understanding, 1,000 years is like talking about a long period of time. What's it saying? Well, to my mind, what it's saying is that the period between Jesus' first coming and his second coming is going to be a long period of time. You might call it the millennium. It's the period of time where Jesus is reaching out to win people for his kingdom through the saints, through us. How do we fight that battle? We fight it through our suffering, through our willingness to suffer for the gospel that we believe in. Then the sixth vision comes in chapter 20, verses 11 to 15. It talks about the final judgment of the living and the dead. You see, at the end of the age where we are able to share the good news, there will be this final judgment. And we've seen already that final judgment means defeat and destruction for those things that have sought to ruin God's world. Death itself will be defeated. And then finally, in chapter 21, the final vision is the beginning of the new creation, God dwelling with his people. But that's for tomorrow. But I hope you get the gist of this. If you think I'm wrong, well, ask yourself why. If you think I'm right and that we are living in the millennium now, then this is the age for us to make Christ known. I guess the question is, are we?